It's Diana, and I am ready to talk about the analysis portion of Max and Ruby. So one of the three things that I said what makes a story is characters, and we have, and then in the story part, I was talking about this story. In particular, I identified 4 characters. So there's Max and Ruby. I'm going to get a visual of them. Okay, Max and Ruby. They're the main characters. There's the grocer. Well, there's a picture of him, but there's the back of his head. And there's Grandma. And it's easy to find Grandma because she's on the last page of this story. And there's Grandma. So there's the 4 characters. Now, the way that an author helps people or encourages people to care about the story as a whole is to get people to care about or get to know the characters. We also talked about events, and some stories have a lot of dramatic big events. An example of a big event might be a big storm, or a war. I'm trying to think, you don't generally find war in picture books. Something very catastrophic and overreaching meaning that, like, literally it's over a lot of things, not just something that one person is dealing with, but it's really big. So with books like that or stories like that, a lot of times the event is big enough for readers, the people who are being shared with, to care about. And sometimes there are stories that a word for it is called character driven, which means that the reason, like really the characters are there driving the story. They are making it happen. It is the characters that people connect with. And I would say that Max and Ruby is, I don't want to say it's just character driven, but that character is very important. Now, I'm going to acknowledge that Max and Ruby are not just characters in bunny cakes, but that Rosemary Wells has them in several stories. So there are many Max and Ruby stories. I keep thinking about Chocolate Chicken because I started thinking about this Max and Ruby book around Easter, and the Chocolate Chicken is the Max and Ruby book that's set at Easter. So the point of me mentioning that is that we can get this feel for these characters in more than just, picture books aren't usually numbered, but I think in general there's about 32 pages. We can get a feel for these characters in more than just one book. And sometimes we pick stories because we really like those characters. I love Max and Ruby. I like their dynamic. Dynamic it's the way they act together. So just a story with just a Ruby story would not be the same as a story with Max and Ruby. And a Max story wouldn't be the same as a Max and Ruby story. The two of them together are more interesting than the two of them apart. To me. I think to more than just me, but I'm going to say to me, I'm going to own that interest. So there are many ways that an author can help the reader get to know a character. And like the character can dress a certain way. So if we notice Max and Ruby, and I'm just looking at this book, and I don't have a comparison. I don't have 5 Max and Ruby books. But Max and Ruby dress similar in that they both wear plaid. And I mentioned this in one of my other videos because I said I wanted to wear plaid to kind of go with Max and Ruby. But then they're distinguished because though they have both have plaid on, Max has got little overalls, and okay, it's very hard to tell if Max has on shorts because his legs are so short. It could almost be a skirt, but I think, oh, that's the part. This is his little rumpus, his little derriere. This is where the split would be in the skirt. if it was a skirt. I think I'm going to go with, like, it's not gender surprising, but gender stereotypical in that Max has shorts on. And Ruby, she doesn't have overalls. It might be a little more mature looking, a little more dressed up. She's wearing a dress. So we have a differentiation. Ruby is older, so she looks more mature. And I'm sorry about my eyes are going to so that I can see what I'm pointing at. And Max, we see that he's younger. We also see that in the size. I mean, look, they're the same color. Bunnies aren't always the same color, but we know we can say, oh, well, they're from the same. Wait a minute, I think Grandma. Well, the grocer is a brown bunny, and I think Grandma is. I don't want to say it, but I think she's a gray bunny. She is. Oh wait, no, she's gray because she's even older, or maybe she's a different color bunny. But we have this tie. So we're having two ties right now. We have this tie of plaid, and we have this tie of the color of the bunnies. So they're a pair. They're brother and sister. They have similarities, but they also have differences, like the way they're dressed. So we also have characteristic. Remember characteristic, well, we talked about character, characteristic and what characterizes. It's like these traits or these identifiers. I'm trying to think of a different word, but a feature. So they also have the way they act. Ruby is very neat. She's got a plan and she's neat. And Max is I don't think Max is careless. I think he's young, but he's a little messy. And that kind of bothers Ruby. So we also have Max, like, well, here's messy. I mean, just the definition of messy, right? He's playing in the dirt. Can you get any messier? I bet you can. That's like a fun challenge. Let's see how messy we can get without dirt. It made me think because of the whole thing of baking, that one time I came into the kitchen and when my kids were young, one of them was just covered in flour. So you can get messy with flour. Okay, I was going somewhere and then I distracted myself with memories. Oh, yes, that Max and Ruby have, their characters are different, the way they act are different, so much so that, Ruby makes this little sign, no Maxes. Max, you're coming in here and creating chaos. You can't come into the kitchen while I'm working. So, another one of the ways, remember we're focusing on food, so I'm going back to the food, is that Rosemary Wells uses the cakes to show Max and Ruby's characters, their personalities. She characterizes the characters with their cakes. So let's look at their cakes. They're next to each other at the end, and they're kind of similar. Like, well, Ruby's is bigger, but they're both lopsided. They're both made by kids, so they're a little bit lopsided. They're both decorated. They decorated them. Their purpose is to please Grandma. Like, I want to do something nice because I love my grandma. So they have those things in common. Now let's look at how they're different. Ruby's is very Ruby-like. It's pink, it's got decorations, she worked very hard on it, she had an intention. Did Max have an intention? Yeah, he did. He wanted to add those marshmallow squirters. But even that, Ruby's has, let's see if I can remember exactly, buttercream roses, sugar hearts, and silver stars. Those things are like a rose. It's like its own. It's all together. A star, a heart, and Max has got squirters. It's just sitting there on the cake. Nobody's touching it, and it's making a mess. And we get that when they're making their cakes. So I went to the end, but I'm going to go back to the beginning, where Or Max is, did he know he was going to, I don't know. It doesn't say. Did he know this, like when he sat down to make this earthworm cake, was it like, I'm going to make this for Grandma? Or was it when Ruby said, I'm going to make Grandma a cake? He's like, oh, me too. And then he like, this is what I have and I can make it into a cake. We have this spontaneousness, like kind of a free spirit. Oh yeah, I'm going to do that without a plan. And we have the planner. Ruby's got a plan. She's working her plan. She's got all her ingredients out. Max can't get his ingredient out because he doesn't have it. Well, he's got his earthworm cake. So Rosemary Wells takes the differences of the cakes, the differences of the ingredients, the difference of the way that the cakes are constructed to show us the difference between Max and Ruby. And at the end, what we have is two cakes that are different and wonderful together. The story of Ruby making her cake would not have been the same without also having Max make his cake. So Max and Ruby together, again, more interesting than one of them apart. And Rosemary Wells uses the cakes in Bunny Cakes to show how the characters are different.